Oh no, holding. Hello and welcome to Thank You Five, a weekly show hosted by Straw Dog Theater Company, where we bring theater artists from around the globe into a conversation about theater in a digital world with a spirit. Sorry for the dog. We're doing this live from home, so Mowgli is fighting to come inside. Where we do conversations about theater with a spirit of gratitude and innovation. I am Manuel Ortiz. As you heard, that was my dog Mowgli. He might try to punch through that door. And I'm a local Chicago theater artist. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can head over to strawdog.org/thankyou5 to join the chat, ask questions, and more importantly, vote on questions so we know which questions you want to ask our panelists. And speaking of panelists, let's meet our guests tonight. I'm going to throw this over to Kat.
Hello! I am Kat Evans. I am a Chicago-based theater artist. I sing, I write, I act. Most of the time, I work with CityLit, Promethean, or Black Button Eyes theater companies here in Chicago. For 5 years, I was part of Starlight Radio Dreams, which was a radio theater company that also podcasted. So if and when we want to talk about digital theater, I have a bunch to say there. And currently, I am writing a Chicago history play. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Johnny Moran.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Johnny Moran. I am a local Chicago theater artist. I'm an actor and a fight choreographer. And you can read my full bio that's in the comments below this YouTube video. I also will be launching my own first show that I'm ever going to produce called the Karaoke. And that'll be on June 23rd at the Howard Street Brewing Company, which is essentially actors performing the most unhinged one-star reviews I can find online. Ooh. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Gwydion Sullivan.
Hello, everyone. Yes, Gwydion Sullivan here. I am a cultural critic and playwright based in Washington, D.C. By day, I'm the executive director of the Penn Faulkner Foundation. You may also know me as the project director of the New Play Exchange for NNPN and one of the co-founders of the Welders. I'm currently working with a co-author on a book about the history of Jewish American comedy, and I'm on the board of the Alliance for Jewish Theater. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Kyle.
Hello, everybody. Yes, that's right. I am here on the panel, which is not where I normally am. I'm normally pushing the buttons, and that's why there was an issue with the buttons just now. Because I'm split focus. I am Kyle. I've been doing theater since I was a wee lad. Been in Chicago since '98, Straw Dog since 2000. We produce theater and we have a good time, and I'm happy that everybody's here doing this. This is fun. So, Manny, back to you.
Hello. In case you all didn't know, Kyle is actually beneath his microphone is knitting a scarf. He just does it all. But cool. Thanks for everything, Kyle. We're glad to have you. We're glad to have everybody. But now that we're all met, let's jump in. We have our first question that we all love to start with, which is a loaded question, but different for everybody. Every week it's a totally different thing, and it evolves into something more. And it's great to watch. It's great to listen to. And the question is, what is theater? So I'm gonna juggle this around. I'm gonna say, let's go with Sullivan.
Okay. Well, for me, I define theater as any live heightened experience created by one or more people for and or with one or more other people. And I intentionally keep that experience, that definition, as broad and inclusive as it can be, because I think we desperately need to do that in our industry right now, and make people see theater everywhere instead of just on a proscenium in a building that somebody paid a lot of money for. Yeah, that's it. That's where I land.
Nice. Thank you. Kat, how about you?
I also go broad. I like a definition of theater that is sentient beings watching other sentient beings. Very broad.
Okay.
I came from grad school where I was doing performance studies as well as theater studies. And so the performance of maps or the performance of borders, the performance of a wedding, the performance of the news, all these are theater to me. And they're all intentional in their visuals and in their audio. And I love all of it. Of course, I chose theater as the traditional medium that I studied, but I believe in theater everywhere. So I'm with Sullivan on this.
Gwydion.
It's Gwydion, yeah.
Gwydion.
I did the
My last name. Gwydion is the. We're all
that was
meeting
my
each other.
that was my military trauma as a child, just calling everybody by their last name. So sorry, Gideon.
Sorry.
That was awesome. Thank you. Who can we toss it to next? How about Kyle?
Sure. Well, I was gonna say, my question is, so here's my question to this, to kick it back. Yes, I agree with everything that is being said. The pushback I have is then, what is the line, or is there a line between just living and theater? Like when it starts to become just a presentation of one person to another person, or even like, because we have had this, because I've been privy to this conversation for a couple of months now, but without being able to like say anything. I'm like, well, then how is that different than just life? Like, which is, if the answer to that is there is no difference, okay, then what is I go back to, what is theater then? Like, why is theater and not just I woke up this morning? And so like, what is the difference there? And that is sort of what I am trying to I'm trying to find that. That's my answer, is what is my answer to what is theater is, I don't know what is theater. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I think we're harking on how do we integrate audience into this conversation and not just make it a spectacle of what is life. Yeah, I think that's a lot to chew on. Pinter would difficult.
In the definition that I gave, there's one word that was very intentional. I use the word heightened. I think it's not just us sitting down. If me pouring you a cup of coffee, I did create that live experience for you, and then we have it with each other. But it's not especially heightened unless I make it heightened, and then it's theater. But if it's just you sitting at my kitchen table and I pour you some coffee, then it's not. There's a kind of intentionality and artificiality, maybe, that's the missing element.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Life Plus.
Oh, yeah.
I do think the audience, the witnessing, is key. And I heard that the heightened piece I have heard also echoed by a lot of dance artists. And then there's a lot of conflict over, well, what's wrong with the mundane then? Is that not worth watching? But of course, is it worth watching is not the same thing as is it theater or is it dance, right? Those are different questions. But I don't think we've heard from Johnny yet, have we?
No, not yet. We're to jump to him. Johnny, what do you think?
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think that you cannot make theater in a vacuum. I think the audience obviously needs to be. It's one of the most important elements to theater making in general, because for the live performing artists, they are just as affected by what the audience feels and does as they are their fellow actors on stage, or just as a solo performer as well. You're riding the waves of like what the audience is feeding you, right? And I think that's part of the attraction of why we do what we do, is to feel that sense of connection. I think that it comes in many forms, but I think the main difference, right, is the idea of a performance that is for a group of people or a person, in however medium that is. It could be like a live stage or stand up or podcast. I think those are all things that create a sense of theater in the audience member's mind.
That's great.
I think
Go ahead.
on that note, so create a sense of theater in the audience is very key to me. Is to what Gwydion was saying, is that it's pushing for the idea of it being not in a very big proscenium building stage, blah blah, blah, whatever that means to
Yep.
you, making theater more about the my wife and I were having this conversation, and her comment was theater is a style, like the same way some theater can be cinematic, some films can be theatrical, and so that it's more about the feeling of theater and less about the place or the location, and so it's the oomph behind theater that makes theater. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I heard Kat use the word witness, and I feel like witness is, in some ways, a very limited thing, and we've really emphasized it a lot in the making of theater for a long time. Because witness, it's kind of an active passive role for an audience to play, but the theater I'm most attracted to now in my life is theater that's participatory. And my role in a participatory piece of theater is not only to witness, it's certainly not primarily to witness. I'm actually a co-creator. And I think even in traditional theater, where an audience is sitting still in equally sized chairs facing in the same direction, there is a participation that's happening. We just don't acknowledge it enough. Your agreement to sit still and face one way and be quiet, if you do all those things, and breathe in unison with the other people in the room, that's all active, that's all participation. And it's a question of degrees. So witnessing that lean back, witnessing the spectacle is one mode, and it's not a bad mode, but it's just not. I see theater as way broader than that. There's active participation as well as more passive.
I don't think of witnessing as passive at all. Like, in order to witness, one must be active, but it's okay. I think it's a semantic
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I feel like there's a difference of watching a show, leaning back and watching a show at the edge of your seat, and actively listening and witnessing that show, and trying to anticipate the next object or the next thing happening, or just being ready and willing and holding your breath, and that is active. I think for me, as a designer, I've been trying to find ways to have a little bit more participation from audience, but maybe inactive participation is not the best word. But for me, I throw the audience into the world of the space, whether it's I've yet to see it, but Invictus Theater is doing Crucible, and I'm so excited to see it because, from what I understand, you are essentially watching the show as trial members sitting behind like a jury podium. So you are actively putting your I'm trying to find the best words for this. You're actively participating in the show as the trial is going on. And that to me is really enticing, is when the audience feels a sense of uncomfortability about it. Not so much as I'm going to tap you on your shoulder and you're going to participate with me on stage, but you have a sense of heightened emotion as well as these actors do, if that makes sense.
I have an emotional buy-in.
Yeah, thank you.
They're implicated in the story in some ways.
Complicit.
Right.
Yeah. There was a great theater company in DC, no longer in existence, called Dog and Pony. And they created a show that ended up touring the U.S. to many cities called Beer Town, which sounds like a shallower experience, and it truly was. It was magnificent. They invented a fictional town, and you as audience members were townspeople. And the experience of the show was the audience deciding among several objects which to put in a time capsule as the town memorializes itself. So they created this kind of magnificent democratic experience where you had to interact with the people you were sitting next to, which weren't always the people you came with, to wrestle with deep questions about life in a democracy and in a civilization. And it was just magnificent.
That sounds like a magnified personal moment. Like this is so simple, but holding the door for someone as they're walking to the same space, or communicating with somebody in the elevator that you don't think you're going to talk to, but you share suddenly you share something in common and you have to actively participate with them. But theater, I guess, not forces, but puts you in a little bit different lens to have that point of connection versus just being complete strangers. That's lovely because it's guided, and to a certain degree, it feels safe.
Well, and wasn't that the whole? I am bad with my theater history, but the whole idea of the fourth wall. The fourth wall was that, like, I am now removed, and like what we're talking about, like, I can just sit and watch. I don't have to engage. I'm not engaged with this person because there's a wall between us that we all have agreed upon, that it's there. We're not going to talk about it, and we have emotional and physical separation. Then that was the pushback against the fourth wall of, like, no. I want you in this with me, and you are now part of this story, complicit, like the crucible you were talking. So I again, it goes back to that question of, like, well, what's the difference of light? Like, if we're bringing them back into the space, how is that different than just holding the door for somebody? And like Gideon said, heightened. It's different. If you're holding the door with a flourish and a big shebang and like that's theater, sure. But like, and I don't know. Sorry, Kat, what were you saying?
Well, we very quickly dive into things like, what are we attracted to, or what do we want, or what I mentioned earlier with the dancer conversation was, is that worth watching, right? That's right. We're all doing this because we love it. But if the question is only, is it theater? If we're defining, then I feel like any audience can define that how they want. And I would say, yeah, maybe the most boring door open in the world, but if somebody was watching and was interested, it became theater. Exactly. But I am more interested in, what kind of theater do you want? And what kind of theater do you want to create? And what's exciting to you, or what's worth watching, or what's worth creating? Because as we all know, it's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
I like that. That's really right. That's great.
Yeah. And I think that's also goes to the you mentioned podcasting, and there's always, again, my quest to determine what is theater is to what Gwydion said about like opening it up, as opposed to let's figure it out so that we can exclude more people. Like no, like the whole point is like I am trying to wrestle with it so that it's broadening my own mind as well as other people's mind of like, I don't know, what is theater? And I love that question, Kat, of like, yes, what do you think is theater? Because I want to make what you're interested in just as much as I want to make what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
and I like that conversation about the fourth wall, because like, what is the alternative to witnessing? Is it voyeur? Like, what are the other roles the audience can play? I mean, they can play spectator, or they could play encourager, or what's the opposite of encouragement? The boo.
I mean, is that
The
sports?
Yeah, the booers, the haters.
The sports ball.
The groundlings.
Yeah. Yep.
That's awesome. That's pretty great. I love this idea of how active an audience needs to be in order, or doesn't need to be, in order for it to be defined as theater. That's a lot to chew on.
Yeah, well, and I don't sound like a film hater, but I do feel like the conversation of like the fact that film can manipulate your senses and always has been able to manipulate senses differently than theater. Being in a room is in many ways more intimate and more exciting, but when we're in a place with a screen that's how many 100 feet long, with speakers that are how tall, and the big booms and the music and what they can do to us to make us jump or whatever, that their sensory manipulation tools, their tech is different. And it's not that theater tech can't be very sophisticated and can't do a lot, but they have different powers.
Yeah.
There's something in what you said earlier, Kat, about asking what that person thinks is theater, that's generous, and I really like the generosity in that. And I guess I want to say that I feel like contemporary theater, the way it's done at so many of the bigger theaters, has this kind of pathological desire to control audiences that is really problematic. And I wish that we as a field spent a lot less time trying to control an audience and more time trying to serve an audience, or give gifts to an audience, or invite an audience, or pick any other verb that's more equal, or that's more friendly or something. And there's so many ways we could do it. I was harping about seats earlier. If we could totally redo how the seats in a theater are, right. Completely and totally, just sitting isn't the same thing for people with different bodies and different, anyway. Yeah. I think if we really were trying to save our industry, we would be thinking a lot about that long and hard. And many people are. So, yeah.
Gwydion, I hear what you're saying about serving. So I think what would be an interesting tactic would be for theaters that do or can generate content that is directly related to the neighborhood that they are in. The pull from the rich tapestry of the place that they are from, and then serve that community what is their immediate past, right? And make it so it's a vital part of the fabric of that community. I think that ritual is going to become so much more important now because of the last 3-4 years. and the need to congregate and find common ground. And I think that's one good way to do that.
Yeah, the sharing of that experience lends itself almost close to theater's original goal, which is just a healing, a place of healing.
Mm.
You know, we are all experiencing this, whether it's grief, trauma, or drama, action, or what have you. Whatever this show is presenting to us, we're all experiencing it together. I think that's the ritual aspect, but just the I think the hyper awareness of audience members now is just understanding that we're all doing this together, feeling this together. Yeah.
Johnny mentioned ritual. That was one of the things that somebody mentioned in a Thank You Five early on, was the idea of ritual and how the theater, like we all theater artists know our various rituals. Thank You Five. That's where it comes from. But it led into this idea of, it goes back again to the ritual doesn't have to be just theater, and there are churches that have ritual that are very theatrical, and whether they know it or not, it's theater. But the idea of the ritual of community and the things that we do to bond ourselves, whether we inherently know it's theater, but that is part of the community gathering, right? To your
Yeah, sharing that experience and sharing that moment together gives it so much more weight. I just did this. I was in LA with Urban Theater, and we did an experience called a show called The Nest. And one of the things we struggled with was we were all trying to get tickets so we can all experience it together. We knew going into that, but we realized as we were trying to get tickets, it was 4 tickets per show. So you experience that moment with only 3 other people. And we were a little upset by it, but then when we went in, we understood the weight of that moment and the the kind of claustrophobicness of the space. It was a little bit of what's the escape room and theater mixed into one. And the escape room aspect was the first part about it. But what we hadn't realized until the end of the show was its goal was for us to relive lost memories. And we entered this room where there was nothing but a bunch of postcards with writing on them, and we found a box that said, you know, we've all forgotten something about someone, about something, about whatever, what have you. Take this moment to remember that, write it down, and leave it. And then realizing that we were all in this room with everyone's lost memories, sharing that moment together had so much more weight. And I could easily see why having more than 4 people would have been a lot, but also just it would have taken away from that moment. It's interesting how you can play with audience size to really give that emotion so much more weight, or that shared emotion so much more weight.
2 of my own shows have done that. I wrote and performed a Theater for One piece. So I was the performer, and there was one audience member, and it was a 15-minute piece. And I would perform it, 5 or 6 times in a given night. And it was I've just never seen so many audience members or so many. It wasn't many, but everybody was weeping and like really in this experience with me, because there was no filter. It was nothing.
Right.
It was just, and then I have a play that's for 20, an audience of 20, and it's half of it is a performer performing, and then the other half is the audience dealing with what they just lived through. And just seeing, it was intended to be about a half-hour experience of audience interaction, and they would never stop. At the end of 30 minutes, we would just keep it going, and they would go 45 or 60 minutes just to keep. We'd opened up this sacred space, and they were in it, and they didn't want to leave it.
Yeah.
They were having meaningful, profound conversations about things that really mattered to them with strangers, because they didn't know each other. And I think that opening up that kind of opportunity for people is a really powerful thing we can do.
I think that's true, but I have a pushback to that, because I get pushed back to that all the time, because I try to, and Tim at Factory Theater, who's probably watching, is laughing and yelling at me at the same time. I try to knock as many seats as I can within reason, for the sake of creating more intimacy in the space by lessening the amount of audience. And it's an uphill battle. I guess my question to the group is, like, have you all tried that, or had those conversations where, you're trying to reduce the audience, but have to fight the battle of, well, we need to sell so many seats to make so much, to make even, or to make a profit off of the show? Where does that battle collide with the intimacy or the importance of what we consider theater?
I'd like to address that. I think the X factor in all that is the length of time through which you're allowed to run a show. There, way back in the day when Artistic Home was on Irving Park, they had a space that could barely fit 20 to 30 audience members, I think, at a time. And the quality of the show was such that it kept people coming back, and their model was such that they could run that show for 3, 4, 5, 6 months and make their money, even though they had fewer seats. So I think that's one factor that isn't talked about enough. Is, why fix something that's not broken? If the show is doing well, keep it going. I don't know how that works. I don't know how that, as a person who hasn't produced as much, but if it's doing well, it should have its life of a full life of its own.
Yeah, let it run its course, and we will all feel when it's run its course.
Yeah, and also, like, from a calculus standpoint, it's like you'll see it, just literally the trend in ticket sales will just tell you maybe it's time to go.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
My pushback real quick was going to be, the flip side is also true of, like, also because the other thing of what is theater is it's ephemeral. It's there and it's gone. You either saw it or you didn't. And half of the stories that we, even tonight, are like, I was in this one play years ago that now we're still talking about, or I had this moment that I'm now sharing with you. It affected me so, like, because it was there and it was gone, and you missed it, or you were part of it, or you heard about it, or so, like, building a thing that is for one night only. And, like, to Gwydion's show, like, one person got to watch that one event. That's what made it special. So, like, the inverse is also true, and the trick is figuring out, all right, which one of these is what we're doing now? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that,
I think it's case by case. I think that's completely, like, you have to, at the time, you have to look at the tea leaves and see, take a hard look at what we think is going to happen.
Sorry, Kat, you were going to say something.
I think the conversation about sustainability, which is extremely high pitched and frequent right now here in Chicago, as many, many more of us are questioning the model that was handed to us when we came up out of school, if we went to school. a lot of us are finding just how unsustainable it is. I saw some lovely data published today by Jess Hutchison about the salaries of artistic directors and the salaries of everybody going down over the last 4 years, and how absurd the disparity is. And so the need to sell tickets is really important some places, and other places, we all know it's not funded by ticket sales. It's
Yeah.
wealthy donors, it's a grant, it's whatever private funds, so is the fact that somebody came might be enough for a theater company. Just if people showed up, that's all we need from them. Other ones, it is in fact about money dollars, and where's that money going, and how do we keep on doing what we do, right? All of that is such an important conversation we're having right now. Somebody sweetly on Facebook, who is a couple states away, checked in with me recently. I was like, "Are you okay with the writer's strike?" And I was like, "Oh, for thinking that I'm so important that I'm in the Writers Guild? Oh man, I would so love to be in the Writers Guild."
Right.
Love that message.
Cool.
But here's
I
the
love
thing.
to be on
That's
strike right now.
But that's an important element, though, because then people who are not on the inside, who don't know the inside baseball, they are starting to see the connective tissue. That's a thing. And that is the electorate. And these are the people that vote these people into subcommittees and whatnot at the federal level who decide all this stuff.
Kat, I saw that data from Jess, and I was like, I was on the staff of Woolly Mammoth in DC for 4 or 5 years, and thought about this stuff a lot when you sort of look around the staff and you see how many staff members were actually artists on staff. There's this myth that we should get more artists on the staffs of theaters. They're there already, and we often ignore them. But the money thing is just irretrievably broken in the American theater. Like, the way we fund theater is just plain broken, and we have to throw it all out. The other thing I learned from my time at Woolly, I was there both with Howard Shulwitz as the artistic director and also Maria Goyanis. Howard talked a lot about getting plays off the assembly line and not having a standard number of days that we rehearse, and then a standard number of days of previews, and then a standard run. And even he, who was passionate about it, we had to work hard to break out of it at Woolly, which breaks out of every other mold in the American theater, as I think we all know. But even that assembly line was hard. But I think we need to do that. European theaters do it. When the show is ready is when they open it, and when the show is done is when they close it, and they start another one. They can do that because the funding model is different there than it is here, and it's not perfect there. I'm not arguing that, but it creates that possibility of less factory-made plays.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a few shows where we've got plenty of time to do all the tech notes. And sure, we can hold all this time. And it's a glorious thing, and everybody feels amazing. But then there's the other show. We've got 4 days for load-in, and we've got 2 days for tech. And then we go right into previews. Okay, well, then what is the goal for previews? Well, we need to be show ready. Well, for me, that doesn't define previews.
Right.
Previews are, we're still working. We may hold. Yeah. I feel like that. I love the idea of that model, and having been in that model, it's wonderful to have. But what I have seen and what I've learned is that it's just a luxury that some people have and some people don't.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say the other part of that assembly line is, once you have a play, world for years it has been the case of, like, world premieres or American, like the premiere, like, where is the second version of, like, it opened over there, now we're gonna do it at this other theater. Like, it's way harder for playwrights and people who've produced plays to, like, hey, we did this thing and it's not as sexy for you to do it again now because we've already did the premiere somewhere else, but, like, can you still produce my play, please? Like, sorry, nobody wants to do that. So that's the other about breaking the mold. It's like that's another part that. And I was sorry, real quick. I was going to also say, speaking of plays in various forms and short plays, Actors Theater of Louisville, 10, 20 years ago, was doing car plays when where there were people, like they would file in 2 people in the back seat, and there was a play that would happen in the front seat, and the actors would come in, get in the car, and do a whole play, and then they would leave, and you're like, okay, now we're getting out of the car. It was the coolest thing. I loved it. Anyway.
Sounds like a fun version of Hellcat.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
I do want to push us along because we're all kind of talking about our different experiences. Speaking of experiences, one of the questions we wanted to answer today was, great question, as what is a lesson that you learned from a job the hard way? What's a lesson you learned the hard way, either on the job or off the job? Most likely on the job, I imagine. Kat, what do you got?
Off the top of my head, I'd say a year or 3 into living in Chicago, I had one of those really exciting moments where my agent called and said, a casting director wants to see you for the lyric opera. And they say they love you. We love Kat, but is she a dancer? And I was
Like a ballet dancer?
they didn't say all this. It was dancer. And so already I was freaking out. And I think I said, well, yes. It was for Showboat. It was the soubrette role in Showboat. And so I went and I sang really well. And I did the copy really well. And I had brought my tap shoes and I was ready. I'd been practicing all week and was ready to dance. And instead they said, how's your tap? And I flinched because I didn't want to talk about my tap. I was happy to tap, but they watched me flinch and they were like, no, really, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your tap? And of course I'm like, well, I mean, is Gregory Hines 1? I'm not, I don't want to. And so obviously I didn't get called in again.
Oh,
man.
Yeah. And so, the lesson I took away was don't flinch.
Don't flinch. That's a good one.
Yeah. That was tough. I mean, I felt really good about everything else I did that day. And the thing that I was nervous about when they asked me about it, I wasn't ready to talk about it. I was ready to do it, but I need to be ready to talk as well.
That's tough.
Wow,
that's a tough place to get to.
Yeah. Something worth holding on to is learning to talk about it and not just doing it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kat.
I learned.
That's right. It's the hard way.
That's the hard way. I learned that I am not cut out to be an understudy the hard way, because I knew I have trouble getting off book and learning my lines, but I now know for a fact that all right, after I learned this lesson, that I cannot learn the lines unless I'm up on my feet doing it, because I tried to get off book, and then they were like, all right, first rehearsal, everybody else was off book, and they were like, Kyle, you have to learn your lines, man. Like, I got a talking to from the stage manager. Like,
oh man.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, this is not the job for me. Like, I can't do it.
Man.
So
that's hard. Yeah. It's hard when you're fully aware of where you're falling short.
Yeah.
And you're trying your hardest. Yeah, that's hard. Gwydion, how about you?
I can't remember when and where I learned this, but I mean, I guess I do, but I don't know if it's probably something I learned over time. But there was one artistic director who commissioned a play from me, and then just in workshopping it, he just wanted to chip away at anything that made the play a little strange or a little different or a little. He wanted to make it more accessible or more, and he would just say, "But that one moment is a little this or a little, and I just finally just said, "Stop." I don't, and I now tell young writers whenever I talk to them to like defend their strangeness, defend their quirkiness, defend their oddness. It's like it's a natural human impulse to see a jagged rock and want to polish it into a smooth ball, but don't do that. don't say yes to that. Like let it be imperfect. Those little imperfections are the way in for other people. Those little chinks in the armor are how art seems more accessible to others and makes it more. And so I guess I've learned, and it's always something to relearn, to kind of treasure my own imperfections or my own or the weirdness in my art, and not like normalize myself, air quotes, for the world.
Because that's the heightened part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that. I wrote that down. Treasure my own imperfections. I'm gonna dry erase that onto my bathroom mirror for a daily affirmation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Johnny, how about you?
Yeah, my toughest lesson was I got hired as an actor to do a children's theater touring company for way back in the day, and I did it for about 2 years, and it was fine, and I thought that we eventually found like a nice groove amongst us, and then I wanted to move on. I felt like I had gotten what I needed out of it, and the artistic directors at the time needed me. They kept getting hired, so I guess they were having trouble finding replacements. So they were calling me and just like begging me to like continue to do this thing, and largely it's my own fault. I got rusty. I did not do a good job of reviewing my script. There was a especially sloppy performance I had. Word got back from the teachers of the classes that were there to see the show back to the artistic directors, and then the next day I was called in for a special rehearsal, going piece by piece and being pretty brutally directed, and then in preparation for another show, did the show, and then I was fired the next day. So the lesson for me is a couple different ways. Is if you're going to do a thing, make sure you're fully committed to it, and don't half-ass it, but also stick to your guns. Like if you don't want to do a thing, say no. Find that boundary and find the strength within you to say, yeah, I'm good, and don't put their problem on you, because it's their responsibility to find the next best person for that job, and that is entirely on them. That has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, that took courage. Thank you for sharing that. There's ownership on your end, and also I'm sure we all are feeling it. We're like, you had a rehearsal and then you had a performance and then you got fired. That feels like a failure on their end too, a major failure on their end. Like where did that come from? That's beside the point. But thank you. And I feel like it harks to what the lesson that I learned, which is kind of owning up to what you want to say no, and owning up to, this is my boundary. I am here. You need to respect that boundary. Whatever that means for you, I'm telling you now that is what it is. I was in a show, we don't need to name the theater, where I had a designer who had a very big project, and we were building it, we were going. I had allotted so much time, and we were getting to the end of that time. And the design had kept evolving and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was just like, I am not the person to be doing this anymore. I literally have told you, I have set this line, this timeline. This is my boundary.
Yep.
Here is where I am done. But it was a big theater. I was really incentivized to get it done, to give everything I possibly could. So it turned into multiple 12-hour days on a weekday, putting my, my muggle job aside to work on my wizarding skills and figuring out what that looks like. And it just became such a thing. It was an episode on social media where I was just literally crying out to the universe, like, please, anyone available to come help me. I just need to get this done so that I feel better about accomplishing this. And eventually I just quit. Quit with a lot of reluctancy. But the lesson I learned from that was I set a boundary. I said, no, for my own health, no, I'm done. And it's in your best interest to find someone else, whatever that means for you. Yeah. And I still tell that story at interviews.
That's a good thing to share.
It's ammunition.
Yeah, absolutely. But speaking of muggle jobs, because we've got so much time, one of the other questions we had was, what is your other job? What do you do outside of theater? We all have those jobs or side hustles that feed a different part about our artistry. Like, I mean, you can see my 3D printers in the back. I fabricate random things on my own, and it has nothing to do with theater. It can be anything I want to do. It's just a self-expression of my own art that I have taken lessons from theater. But what is that for you? I'm gonna start with Kyle this time.
What is my so I want to define the question. Are you saying what do I do as an artist that is not theater, or the muggle job that is completely not theater? You know, like, are we talking about
That's
art?
fair. That's fair. This martini is done, so that question was not clear. What is your other job outside of theater? We'll stick with that.
So outside of theater, I do video production as my day job, but I've also done various other jobs, such as I used to be an electrician or work for an electrician. I used to do construction. I've waited tables. I used to work in real estate. So I've done a number of things in my day job factor of, like, while also supporting my theater career of being a theater artist. So, but one of the craziest jobs I ever had was I worked at speaking of assembly line, I worked at an assembly line factory for one day. And
one day?
Speaking of knowing what you're good at and what, like, I couldn't do it. The mental capacity of just doing the same rote physical thing with my body, I couldn't handle it. I was like, I can't do this. So
that's fair. And then Kyle, I'm gonna ask you to pass it on.
I'm gonna say Johnny Mo.
Well, I'm done with every other actor I know has done. I've been in the service industry for almost 30 years. Right now, I have a day job where I work for a small business lending company, and that's good because it allows me to work from home and it has some flexibility. And I still bartend on the side. And occasionally someone hires me to be an actor. I'm lucky. I'm shooting a short film Friday, and just trying to put myself back out there a little more regularly. Thus, producing my own show, just as a chance to continue just to work those muscles and get in front of people and make people laugh.
Nice. Who are you going to pass it to, Johnny?
I'm going to pass it to Kat.
My most steady writing job is I write videos for 6-year-olds about the Bible.
Oh,
I,
That's going to be in
well,
demand.
there's this faith-based streaming service called Yippee, and I'm on their writing team. I write these devotional videos for the 3 to 8-year-old set, and I write them on various books of the Bible or on things like integrity and teach them little concepts. It's an interesting way to keep sharp. You get one actor, you get 5 minutes, you get a green screen. It's very low budget. But
wow.
that's my writing job that pays. But mostly what I do these days, I'm a leadership and communication coach for business types. So they'll send me to big tech or an investment bank or private equity, and I will work with middle management all the way up to the C-suite on how they communicate, on how they carry themselves, visual and vocal presence, change management, change vision. I can't seem to motivate my team. It's probably because you're a jerk. And going to help you with this thing called empathy. And so there's
Oh
just
my
other
God.
ways to motivate people other than scaring them. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
what are your options other than coercion? That's that's what I do, and it pays really well. And I'm very lucky that I was recruited to do it 10 years ago. Also, I've been a yoga instructor since 2010,
Awesome.
and I will pass
That's
it to Manny. Manny, what's your muggle job?
me.
Yes.
I was chewing on your thought.
Oh,
As sorry, I was chewing on that and I lost my train of thought. My muggle job, actually, I've been recently blessed. I'm the TD at Cabaret Zazu in Broadway, Chicago.
Nice.
So that is currently my job, and it's been a dream come true. It's one of those things where I still feel imposter syndrome, but they highly encourage, doing what I need to do at the theater, also doing things like tonight, things like teaching another show, designing, encouraging, taking what I learned from that space to another space, and taking what I learned from another space to bring back home, and always knowing that that is my home. And it's it's great. So I actually just opened up my own workshop. It's called Manolo's Workshop. One of my best friend's husband likes to call me Manolo, so I decided to make that my company name. And it's great.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
you
But
said Cafe Zuzu, and I heard Madame Zuzu, which is
oh no,
that's like Billy Corgan's tea shop in the North Burbs. I'm like, you work for Billy Corgan? But no,
No.
actually, what you do is much cooler.
Cabaret Zazu. It's a circus dinner theater. It's pretty great. Come check it out.
Yes, much cooler,
If they're
actually.
If they're watching, I'm plugging the show. Come check us out. Gideon, how about you? We're coming close to the end.
Yeah, I do so many things, too many things at once. My main Muggle day job, I am the executive director of the Penn Faulkner Foundation, which you may know we give away the Penn Faulkner Award for Fiction. Just did give it away like 2 weeks ago to an amazing author named Yun Lee for her book, The Book of Goose, which I highly recommend. So that's my full-time gig, but I also am the project director of the New Play Exchange. I don't know if you're familiar with the New Play Exchange. I founded that with NNPN a decade ago. It launched 8.5 years ago, and I'm very lucky to be in that stewardship role. And then on the side, I write with my co-author, we write about comedy, mostly for Salon, Moment Magazine, a few other places, Three Quarks Daily, write about comedy and American culture, a little bit of politics, a little bit of philosophy. My co-author is a professor of philosophy. And we are together working on a book called Punching Up, the comedic story of Jewish life in America over the last 100 to 125 years. So it's what we can learn from looking at Rube Goldberg and the Three Stooges all the way to Tiffany Haddish and Randy Rainbow. So it means I get to do lots of cool interviews with interesting people. I'm very lucky.
That's awesome. We're running short on time, so I just want to say thank you to everybody who's helped contribute to Straw Dog, and thank you, Five. But I do have one last question that I want to quickly do around table. You have 10 seconds. What is one? We're gonna have to narrow it down. What is one book that you would recommend to theater artists around the community? Johnny, go first.
Sanford Meisner's book on his class.
Nice. Pass it, Johnny.
Kat.
The Anti-Racist Writing Workshop by Felicia Rose Chavez. It's amazing.
Yes. Quiddian.
The best theater book I ever read is Theater of the Unimpressed by Jordan Tannehill. Have to read it. It's a powerhouse. Kyle.
I'm gonna. I don't read books and or plays mostly, but I'm gonna say the complete works of William Shakespeare abridged because it's sitting right there holding up my camera.
Because it's holding up my drink.
No, not the drink, just the camera.
Mine, whenever I have young apprentices or young students, I always say the Backstage Handbook. It is like the Bible for any actor who wants to learn how to do theater in the community. This is like a go-to, has everything you need to know as a technical director or just a technician in general. That's mine. And I think that's time, well past time. But
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, and I will say I will take over and jump and do a little outro that I'm sorry I forgot to send to Manny so that he would read it, and I'm going to try and pull it up real quick as we're sitting here
And we're
stretching.
stalling.
It is, here we go, there's the drive. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to officehours.global for helping donate and make this happen. Thank you, Five. It's made possible by Straw Dog Theater Company ensemble members. Straw Dog is run on a free theater model where our productions are available to anyone and everyone. We can only do this with generous donations from our community. You can find more information about donating or becoming a Straw Dog member, helping us continually support our work at strawdog.org. If you liked this show, thank you, Five, and want to be a part, please email Kyle at strawdog.org. We are always looking for more people to talk about theater. Theater. And that's it. There you go. Thank you all.
That's it.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you all. It was so wonderful chatting with all of you.